So what we do is we have a kind of a virtual hub that Civic Nebraska hosts, and we post all of our community builder workshops there. So if you're ever interested in checking out one of our CBWs, you can go to that website and we'll share that with you in a follow-up message, so you can go back and watch, or you can share it out with anyone that wasn't able to attend today. So I am going to share my screen. And backtrack here a little bit. Okay. So I'm going to do a quick little overview for those of you who aren't super familiar with Collective Impact Lincoln. We are a partnership between Civic Nebraska, Nebraska Appleseed, and the South of Downtown Community Development Organization. So Collective Impact Lincoln, we've been around since 2017. We just finished up our first 3 years of the project, and we received additional funding to keep moving along and do another 3 years of this work, if not longer. So essentially, we support neighborhood community conversations, leadership opportunities, and action opportunities to help create more vibrant and inclusive neighborhoods. We focus on 6 specific neighborhoods in Lincoln, and that includes Everett and Near South, Belmont and Clinton, University Place and Hartley. And so really what we're trying to do with this initiative is just create some positive resident-led change in those 6 specific neighborhoods. And I know a lot of you are familiar with the work that we do. We do that with door-to-door canvassing, not so much right now. We've been text and phone banking with residents to check in. Our organizers have been doing that over the last few months. So we really try to meet people where they are so we can have a better understanding of what some of those initiatives might be that they want to lead. We support various neighborhood projects. We've done quite a few over the last 3 years, and hopefully we can do more of those either in the virtual or in-person setting. We provide leadership trainings like this. So our community builder workshops, we try to focus on different aspects and topics that we hear from folks in the neighborhoods that they want to find out more resources about or share different skills that they have. We help support and develop various action committees. And researching different policy changes is a big one. So our group specifically has worked a lot in the housing affordability and adequacy realm. And so we're still working on those things, and we have some exciting things coming up. So if you're interested in any of that, feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to point you in the right direction there. So the other thing I wanted to just kind of touch base on really quick before we get started here, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can actually see everyone. So we generally have had a very structured community builder workshop platform and format. So we're changing things up a little bit this time. This conversation around safety is a little bit new for us, but it's something that we've heard a lot in our 6 neighborhoods. We've just been trying to figure out how to navigate the conversation and what to talk about. So after a lot of discussion amongst our team and deliberation, we decided to go ahead and just start out with this hour and a half conversation about how do we define neighborhood safety in our specific neighborhoods as individuals. And so we want to use this space to talk about some of those components, what folks are thinking about when we talk about neighborhood safety. And really how we got here is via our South of Downtown partners and some of the things that were happening in the Everett neighborhood specifically. So I'm going to hand it over to Kat really quick. So Kat, you can talk a little bit about what that has looked like for you and how we got to this point.
Yeah, so Pepe Fierro is he's the phone number here. This is his first time using Zoom. So Pepe, thank you for bearing with these many voices, and to help him, maybe just say your name before you speak, and at least the first time. So yeah, I live in the Everett neighborhood as a resident. I'm also a community arts organizer, and I've been in and around the community most of my life in different capacities. And so yeah, it's a community I care a lot about. And I, living here, have had concerns just about like catcalling and things like that. And it hadn't really been like at the top of my mind. But then there was kind of like a short period of time where there were some, there were like 2 murders within a weekend, and it was very jarring and it was scary. And I think people in the neighborhoods, like in the near South and Everett, like felt that. And so we were thinking, like, how can we respond to that? And it was really great because Pepe, who's on the call, was already organizing like safety meetings, just like behind his restaurant with some of the different business owners and nonprofits on the block, kind of talking about some of the things that I was already concerned about and that a lot of people were already thinking about. And so Isabel, who's my coworker, and some of the other South of Downtown team members were kind of just popping in to see like how can we engage in this conversation. And it just so happened that there's folks in Belmont and all over the city that are thinking about safety as well. So we thought, yeah, if we were going to have this conversation, sort of defining it and then letting this space sort of dictate who do we bring on as the experts on the things that we really care about, whether that's sexual harassment or child safety or substance abuse or policing or domestic disturbances, like whatever it might be. So yeah, that's how this conversation was born. I'm really excited to see all of you here.
Thanks so much, Kat. So now we're going to take a little bit of time and do some introductions, and we'll start things off with the Collective Impact Lincoln team. I can go first. My name is Nancy Petito. I use the pronouns she, her, and hers, and I'm the director of Collective Impact Lincoln. I'm housed at Civic, Nebraska, which is, again, one of the partners on this project. And so that's me. I will say, Isabel, you can go next, and then Kat.
Hi, everyone. It's so cool to see new faces. My name is Isabel. I'm a community organizer with CAT at the South of Downtown Community Development Organization. So we're doing the work in the Everett and near South neighborhoods, which are awesome neighborhoods. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And what was the other thing that you said, Nancy? I'm so sorry.
I didn't really set it up that well. You can share whatever you want.
I'm excited to be here.
I feel like you called on me and I did just speak, so I will keep it brief, but I'm an arts organizer, so I organize like mural projects and workshops and stuff, and safety wasn't something I would have ever covered by myself, so this is why we have this awesome team. Yeah.
Thanks, Kat. Let's have Mika and Vic.
Hi everyone, I'm Mika. I use she, hers. I am the Whites Fellow for Nebraska Appleseed. Basically just means I'm around for a year. And Appleseed works with Belmont and Clinton neighborhoods. I think I got everything.
I'm Vic Clafter. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am a community organizer at Nebraska Appleseed in the Collective Impact Lincoln program. And like Mika noted, I work in the Belmont and Clinton neighborhood specifically. I can pass it to Kieran.
Hi everyone, I'm Kieran. This is actually my first community builder workshop I just started on pretty recently. I'm housed through Civic, Nebraska. My neighborhoods of focus are Hartley and University Place. I'm really excited to hear everyone's perspectives today.
Awesome. I think that's all the CIL folks. I'm not missing anyone, right? Don't want to leave anybody out. Okay. We're doing this on a weeknight. Usually we do it on a Saturday. We're changing things up a little bit. So that's why some of our team members aren't able to join us. And I know there's a lot of stuff going on today. So I appreciate everyone taking the time to join this conversation with so many wonderful things happening in our city. So next, I'm going to have the co-facilitators introduce themselves. So if you can just share your name, your preferred pronouns, and what has your involvement and interest been around safety in your specific neighborhoods? I think we'd love to hear that from you. So Lindsay, do you want to start us off?
Hi, everybody. My name is Lindsay Limbach. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm representing the Belmont neighborhood this evening. I do currently live in the Woods Park neighborhood. Before that, I lived in the North Bottoms, which is just a neighbor to the south of Belmont. But I did work as the school community coordinator for the Belmont and Goodrich CLCs for, I don't know, quite a few years, and had just been in the Belmont neighborhood working, but almost felt like a second home for about 7 years. So I'm just gonna do my best to offer some perspective and to help guide some conversation. So thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. Majid, would you like to introduce yourself? I know you're on the move here.
I am. I'm multitasking it out. I've got like 4 different events, including this one today. So bear with me. Can you see me? Ooh, okay. Hi. So my name is Majid Miller Jenkins. I'm she, her, hers. And I guess my piece of this is I live in the UL type neighborhood on like 34th and Holdridge. And I am working to reinvigorate neighborhood watches in the new age version of doing them as neighborhood block parties. So I'm an activist, and I'm working very hard on trying to unite as many people as I can to invoke as much change as I can in as many areas as I can put the pokers in the fire. So I'm just constantly on the go, but I'm really excited to be a part of this. So I am going to pop into the LPSDO office because I'm going to sign up to speak at the school board meeting as well. So I'll be in and out on my video, but I will be available to speak whenever.
Thank you so much. And I love that idea. We need to talk more about re-envisioning Neighborhood Watch as block parties. That sounds amazing. If Pepe is able to unmute and introduce himself, that would be great. Pepe, are you able to do that?
Do you mean me or this tile? Because it's not Pepe, I'm sorry.
So Pepe is a new Zoom user. Your mute button, if you're using a desktop, is going to be in the bottom left-hand side of your computer screen. I can also, yay!
How's that?
Yeah, you're good.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. As Kat said, I'm a firstie on this. My name is Pepe Fierro, and I own Pepe's Bistro right there on 11th Street, 11th and B. It's great neighbors, community crops south of downtown, Juju's, and of course, Everett Elementary. So I'm here just to learn from you guys and see what I can do to be a better business neighbor to everybody.
That's wonderful. Thanks so much for joining us, Pepe. So I'm going to go ahead and go around the room now and ask the remaining participants to introduce yourselves. If you want to share, again, your pronouns, and then maybe what organization or communities you feel connected to. Let's go ahead and we'll start with Grant.
Hi, my name is Grant Daly. He, him, his pronouns, please. And I am a community organizer with NeighborWorks Lincoln. Our focus is neighborhood support and vitality in what is called the NRSA, the Neighborhood Revitalization Strategic Area. And common speech, that means like South Salt Creek, Everett, Near South, Clinton, Hartley, Malone, some of Lincoln's oldest neighborhoods, basically. And I've was a resident of South Salt Creek up until recently, where I live in Malone now, near the NeighborWorks office. So yeah.
Awesome, thanks, Grant. Nicole?
I'm Nicole Green, and pronouns she, her, hers. I don't have any official affiliations. I just live in Near South, and I've had some concerns about the safety, and a friend told me about this. I guess I'm a doctoral student at UNL, so I do a lot of walking between downtown and Near South. So I'm just interested to like learn from everybody and see what I can do to help.
Awesome, thanks so much for joining us. Laura?
Hi, everybody. My name is Laura Uradel. I prefer she, her, hers pronouns. And I live on the line in between Irvingdale and Indian Village neighborhoods. And also just I'm aware of some of the work that some of these organizations like Civic Nebraska and South of Downtown and Nebraska Appleseed are doing because I know some of their staff through my work at Leadership Lincoln.
Awesome. Thanks, Laura. Victoria?
Hi, I'm Victoria, she, hers, and I live in Capitol View, and I saw this on the South of Downtown Instagram, and I've been trying to develop a deeper connection to my community in terms of being able to cut down on policing and, you know, drawing on the community to help with, and especially since this is safety oriented. So no, I'm just interested to hear what there is that I can do just as a community member to, so that we don't have to rely on the cops all the time.
Great, thanks, Victoria. Ella?
Hi, I'm Ella. She, hers, or any pronouns are fine. I live in Clinton now, but most of my time in Lincoln, I've lived in Everett and near South neighborhoods. I'm connected to Lincoln Public Schools. I have a son who's a senior, and this is his last semester. I've recently, when I moved to Clinton neighborhood in November, I started getting involved with the meeting with the Clinton neighborhood organization to see how I could contribute there. And various other kind of decentralized communities across town. And I think that was it, right?
Yeah,
that's me.
Perfect. Thank you. Gloria?
Let's see here. Let's see, my husband brought me food, so I decided not to eat in front of you and shut the camera down, but I don't turn down a good supper that a man makes for you. So anyhow, I prefer she, her. I'm with the Clinton Neighborhood Organization, been in the neighborhood for 20 plus years. We won't say the exact number, getting to feel old finally. Always worried about safety. You run that fine line of having cops constantly involved to tone the problem down or solving it yourself, or just feeling safe to walk from here to there after the sun's down. You know, we've had our fair share in Clinton neighborhood of crimes. I kind of always say I feel my neighborhood is safe because they always shoot who they're aiming for, but that's not really the mentality we want to take. But you know, when people call, oh, you live in Clinton, oh my gosh, aren't you scared? No, they shoot who they're aiming for, but that's not how we want to live our life either.
Thanks, Gloria.
Yep.
Okay, sorry. We've had some new people join and I want to try to get through everyone before we get started. Devin, would you want to introduce yourself? Oh, you're on mute.
Hello, I'm Devin, or you can call me Dev. I am frothing off of these community builder workshops. This is like my 4th or 5th one now, and I don't know, I've really enjoyed learning about how I can be a better community member and more civically engaged, and the power I have to do so. I'm also an artist, super passionate about how photography can be used as a tool to advocate for like the betterment of quality of life for folks. And yeah, that's me. Thank you.
Thanks, Deb. We're always glad to see you on these calls. Cassie?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. Yes, I'm Cassie. My pronouns are she or they. I live in Everett. I've done some renters' rights advocacy in the past, and I care a lot about making our streets safer. I walk and I bike a lot, and I wish I could do more of those things when it gets dark by myself, but I kind of don't right now because it's really dark and I don't know who's around. So it's kind of my interest in coming here. I also am interested in reducing reliance on the police for community safety, and I want to find ways that we can keep ourselves safe without just like bringing more guns into a situation whenever we have a safety concern.
Great, thanks so much. So I think Megan and Samantha are left. So we're just introducing ourselves. We're sharing our preferred pronouns and then maybe what communities or groups you feel connected with. So Megan, do you want to go first and then Samantha?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Megan McGuffey, she, her, hers. And I've been a Everett neighborhood resident since 2014 and just recently started leading Community Crops, which is a nonprofit that does community garden work throughout the city. So particularly interested in things that are going on in my own neighborhood and the things that we see on the corner of our business at 11th and B, but also just because we have a presence throughout the city, you know, how we can be positive and helpful throughout the community. So thank you.
Samantha, you can go ahead. Yeah.
And hi, I'm Samantha Thomas. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a community builder for LPS's CLCs and some new communities I'm a part of. So I'm from Lincoln, but I recently just moved back here I went to school in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So I still even feel pretty connected to that community, especially right now, given the events that unfolded recently. But I do feel really connected I live in the Woods Park neighborhood and have enjoyed my time here. And yeah, I think I feel pretty rooted in the LPS community and CLC community, so.
Great, thanks so much. Okay, I think I got everyone. I'm gonna hand things over to Vic now, who is gonna kind of do some framing for the rest of this session. Vic, do you wanna go ahead?
Yeah, and if you wanna actually, Nancy, you can share your screen and that way I don't have to deal with it. And you can go to the first slide that we just left off from, which I believe is yes. So I wanna ground us back in to what we're talking about here, that this is different than typical because we're often very solutions oriented. And while this is not anti-solutions, I think there's a step before we get to solutions for public safety where we have to figure out, what does public safety actually mean? What does that look like? What does it feel like? What does it taste, smell, sound like? And Kat did a lot of work in framing that and identifying that we have to identify that first. And so this conversation tonight, like Nancy had alluded to, we hope to garner from this, what are the topics that people are really energized and motivated to keep delving into, and then making more space to then delve into those topics with the people who are most interested and called to that. Because there's a public safety, whether it's in one neighborhood or when we're looking at the whole city, like it's really complex. There's a lot of factors that go into it. So starting with this grounding exercise, and Kat and I used to do slam poetry together, and I said something earlier that reminded her of that. It could be a writing prompt, but we're not going to make it a writing prompt, okay? So you're welcome. But we are going to get a little sensey, and I want you to think about right now, so looking around your surroundings or just taking in your surroundings, I want you to look at something, notice it. It can be anything. Touch something. Hear something. I'm sorry that probably it's going to be the sound of my voice. If you have something that you can smell, try that. I hope, yeah, I don't want to smell myself for sure, but I feel like that's what I'm stuck with. And taste something. If you have something around to taste, I'm going to taste my water. All right, cool. So our body's like taking in a lot. Cool. Now let's think about, what does one of those sensations, or more if you're a multitasker, I'm not, what does one of those sensations feel like when you feel safe in your neighborhood? And so thinking about the place that you live in, or it could be any place in Lincoln really that you feel comfortable in. And think about what are you seeing when you feel safe? What do you hear when you feel safe? Do you smell something when you feel safe? Is there something you can touch that helps you feel safe, or that you will be able to touch that if you feel safe? I can give an example, and I would love to. I'm gonna give this example, and if other people want to offer things, I would love to hear some. What are those sensations that make you feel safe, or that are indications that you feel safe? I think for me, and a couple of people have mentioned this, I can see where I'm going. So whether it's at day or at night, I can see where I'm going. If I hear sounds, they're familiar. I can recognize them. They aren't making me guess about what's that sound. And, you know, I can breathe easily. I'm not smelling bad stuff. I'm not smelling trash or fire or something. Things are clear. Thanks for putting in the chat as well. Absolutely, I should have said that too. If you want to mention something like this in the chat, that's great. But does anyone want to mention something, one of these sensations that they associate with safeness?
I'll jump in here.
Yeah.
So in my neighborhood, we have a lot of families that live around us. So for me, hearing the sound of children outside, smelling bonfire, or that heavy sense of humidity that lets you know that there should be kids outside playing, seeing them, hearing them, I guess like the sensation, body sensation that makes me be calm is hearing that actual like people noise, like the sound of people outside doing something and being around. Silence makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's a great one. Thanks for sharing that, Majid. Do others have ones that they want to mention?
Going along with Maggie, I really love seeing kids outside, and there's a bunch of kids that live very close to me that crowd around. If you haven't been to Neighbors Park in the Woods Park neighborhood, it's just an awesome park with a ton of trees, a lot of open space too, but I like to see the kids out and about. And Victoria, I respect like the no shouting piece, but when they're kind of shouting to each other and, you know, they're playing and hiding in the trees and things like that, that's what I love to see in my neighborhood.
I was going to say something similar, actually. I live right next to the playground of Everett Elementary, and laughter makes me feel really safe. Like there's kids outside having a good time, or adults. And then like there's a quality of screaming that's like happy screams because you're a kid and it's just awesome to be outside running around. That's really distinct from like angry yelling.
This is really great. And I love this pattern that's emerging that, and from the chat as well, that it seems that a component that's true for a few different people is that people are a big component of feeling safe. How we're understanding that other people are doing in our environment, and that they are signaling to us whether things are safe or not. So thank you. I'm gonna, that was a good grounding thing to kind of imagine, like, how does our body experience safety? I'm gonna pass it, I think, to Kat or to Nancy.
Yeah, thank you, Vic. I have to share mine really quick though. So I have a set of neighbors who they're constantly cooking and their door is usually open. And when I take my dogs on a walk around the block, hopefully they don't hear me say that and start barking. When I walk by Karna and John's house and their door is open and they've been cooking all day, I just smell these amazing things. And usually if she shares it with me, which I'm always like, if I walk slow enough and I'm just like, hey, I'll walk by and I'll end up with like some soup or some bread or some who knows what. And that just like really grounds me and makes me feel safe and loved and appreciated in my neighborhood. So that was a great exercise. Thank you, Vic. Okay, so now we're gonna kind of talk a little bit as a group here. And, you know, we've got Lindsay and Majid and Pepe to kind of help start us off with some of these questions. And these are the questions that Kat and that group came up with based on what were some of the things happening in the Everett neighborhood. So these are sort of the guiding questions for this conversation, so we can start to think about how do we define neighborhood safety as individuals in our communities. And so the first question I want to pose to our co-panelists or co-facilitators is, what to you makes a neighborhood safe? And maybe we can do those first two questions together. What and who, in your experience and in your opinion, makes a neighborhood safe? And yeah, go for it, Maji.
Okay, so for me, again, my thing is like neighborhood watches is what I'm trying to rebuild. So in my opinion, knowing your neighbors, knowing the people that live above, below, across from, next to you is what facilitates that feeling of safety. Being able to be confident that if something were to happen, if you had a kitchen fire, if you had some kind of need, that you know your community well enough, that you know at least 5 people inside of your block that would be able to come to your aid. In my opinion, that's what shifts the dynamic inside of how people feel about where they live. When you feel more connected, then you feel more safe, because then you're not living in this society of fear of, oh my gosh, I wonder who my neighbor could be, versus, oh my gosh, I wonder who that neighbor is. And it also facilitates a sense of solidifying, see something, say something. If you see a child being yanked down the street and they're screaming their head off, and you know that the person that's yanking them down the street is their mother, you have a completely different reaction than if you don't know that child or that parent and you just see this happening. You don't know if you should say something, even though you're seeing something. So making it more effective in ensuring that different situations are viewed at with the correct perception, so that you can be the most active initiate inside of the situations that you can be. That's my piece.
I was gonna say a pride ownership, not like property ownership, but ownership in your neighborhood. If you feel like this is my neighborhood, this is not happening on my block, you take a different aspect. If all the kids on your block are your kids now, if all the houses in your whole street, so if you lower the bad vibes on your block, that is not acceptable on your block, the whole block improves. Whether it's a little bit of paint on the porch so it doesn't look like the rundown drug house down the block, or any of that, as it steps forward and everybody on this block takes ownership of it, it seems to improve, and you just feel safer walking by it compared to the vacant house with the blown out windows that who knows what's actually inside of it. So that's.
I'd love to hear from Pepe too. Yeah. Just a reminder, the unmute button is on the bottom left, but also anyone feel free to jump in. It's a discussion.
Okay. Thanks for the reminder. I just talked my head off. Everything else just mentioned, very good points, and I feel those are great points. And I think a good relationship between business owners and organizations, if they know each other on a first name basis, it's a good way to feel safe. What was mentioned was taking ownership of the neighborhood is another one. So the things that have happened there in Everett, and I think it could have been prevented. This was 3 years ago. Had there been a better relationship between me as a business owner and the next few doors over, had we been able to communicate a little better.
Thanks, Pepe.
Sure.
Does anyone else have any, feel free, anyone can jump in and answer these questions.
I kind of wanted to expand on, I guess, continued connectivity too. Like thinking that it can be a one and done. Oh, I said hi to my neighbor one time, so now I'm good, isn't enough. That's why, like with my neighborhood watch thing, I'm doing it the third Saturday of every month to keep consistency, because people move, people expand their families, they get married, and keeping up with what's going on in your neighborhood is just as important as the initial contact, in my opinion.
I think I want to add to the who makes a neighborhood safe. I heard this in a creative placemaking workshop, is this idea, I think it maybe, actually, I don't know where I heard anything anymore, but this idea of neighborhood efficacy and how the most ordinary people are contributing to the safety of neighborhoods by their everyday actions and activities. So going to the bus stop, sitting on your front porch smoking, these are all times when a human being is out in the public and has eyes on the street and is making choices and doing what they do. And so these people like smoking on their porches, like see all the kids in the neighborhood doing their thing, and those people are helping make the neighborhood safer. So kind of thinking of all those the high level, like, you know, city infrastructure, to that person like at the bus stop waiting for the bus, watching the kids go to school, just like as a result of their everyday action, you know?
And I think to
Go ahead.
Sorry, I think just to piggyback off of that, the kids' or the youth perspective is also really crucial. If you go, which sometimes it's hard to connect with the youth if you're maybe not, if you're just maybe a random person, sometimes it's a little bit more difficult, but connecting with the youth and really asking them where do they feel safe, where are the places that they're maybe a little bit more uncomfortable, I think also uncovers some safety conversations. But the kids are also a part of what make a neighborhood safe. I know when we were at Goodrich and we had a Belmont neighborhood meeting going on, and some of the residents were kind of complaining about the middle schoolers maybe cursing along the way home or stomping on their grass or, you know, messing with their trash cans or something. That opened up a good conversation with us and our middle schoolers on how can we start to work together in order to, you know, make our neighbors feel safe, but also make sure the middle schoolers have the respect they deserve too. So opening up those conversations, I guess, among different generations, I think is also really helpful.
I'd like to hop in on the like relationship theme here. And to Lindsay's point, especially intergenerational relationships are really helpful in like what can make a neighborhood safe. And I have been, I've been working to create intentional relationships in my neighborhood where there are also like 5 people who can watch out for each other's needs. And so if we I feel like if we're building relationships and communities of care, then we'll be able to help address, you know, a lot of the conditions that, a lot of the public conditions that could make folks result to desperate measures or whatever. And so it's a slightly different take on that, but like having 5 people I live nearby who can check in on each other and help each other out has been something an approach I've been trying to take.
That's so great. Thank you everyone for sharing. I want to make sure we get through all of these questions, but feel free to put any comments that you have if you want to answer these questions in the chat, and we can always follow up on those later on. So are there certain times of the day, the year, the month, the week, when your neighborhood, when you feel like it's a little bit safer than other times?
Late fall through spring seems to be a lot safer from what I've seen. I think mid-spring, people are getting cabin fever, they're getting out. I see things happening in front of the restaurant, everything from gun and knife fights to deranged people running to the restaurant beating up kids. Just parents not watching their kids. You know, had a little toddler walking across the street, 11th Street, which is super busy. Just walking across the street, just butt naked. Nobody knew who the parent was. So I think summertime people are just not really paying attention, and some of the bad element starts to kind of come up. So, and on that, like I mentioned, I think landlords need to be held accountable. The thing about they don't want to spend money because they got to pay more electricity and this and that, that's not a good enough excuse. There's solar powered lights that can be put up, which I guess y'all saw that in the chat room.
Yeah, I definitely think lighting as far as like time of day and also time of year, like because it's of course like darker in the winter. I definitely think about lighting and how that impacts my sense of safety. Especially in maybe not, it's like we have like little spots. It's not like the whole neighborhood, but I've definitely heard people talking about like in their parking lot to their apartment when they're going home, or more places like that, like private.
Well, and speaking of private for that matter, Kat, I feel less safe when there's not as much respect for other people's space. I'm probably like cutting across yards isn't the best example, but where my neighborhood is, we have this little like fenced in courtyard that is not meant to be a through street. It is not meant to connect two sides. Like, it is our yard. And that's something like we've talked with our landlord a bunch of times about. Like, there hasn't been anything stolen there, it hasn't been an issue, but just having random people that are not part of the neighborhood that we don't know just passing through our closed-in space is very disconcerting. And I think having respect for other people's boundaries is something that really makes me feel safe.
That's so interesting that you mentioned that. I have kind of the opposite perspective. People walk through my yard all the time as well. It's just like, I guess, a convenient path to some apartment buildings. And it really doesn't bother me. And I've heard from others, like, why doesn't that bother you? There's just people in your space. So, like, I don't know. They're not hurting me, and they're just trying to go on their way. And so to me, that doesn't rise to the level of a safety concern, because they're people just like me trying to get where they want to go.
I was going to say about in terms of time of year, I kind of have like the opposite perspective in some ways of Pepe, where I find spring and summer to be the times I feel the safest, probably partially because of the daylight, but also because of that's the time when people in my neighborhood are outside, and I have a garden in my alley. And so people are always seeing me out there in the garden, and that's the time when I, can see people and connect with them and get to know them. And like, for example, my neighbor who suggested I come to this apparently moved in last October, and she lives like 2 feet from me basically. And we didn't meet until, the pandemic started in March. So so for me, that like being out and about and like seeing people and being seen, I feel like really adds to the safety. Whereas in the winter, when you're inside and everybody's kind of like clammed up, I feel much less connected to my neighborhood.
Yeah, I have to echo that as well. There not being as much of a human connection or like passing by your neighbors during the winter. And then I think it was also mentioned that it's just so dark. I mean, it gets dark from 5, to it's dark when I come home from work. It's dark when I leave to work, and so that feels like a less safe time to me. But I think actually, if you look at it statistically, there is technically more crime that happens in the summer. But one other thing, really fast on that thought, I ride my bike a lot, and one of the things that I feel helps keep me safe is like well-maintained, sidewalks and walking infrastructure, and things and trails and stuff like that.
I wanted to ask, so we're talking about a variety of I love the like difference of perspective on the passing through yards, making some uncomfortable and some not. And I think that then like gets these gears going for me about where kind of the free spaces, and I think we're talking a lot about like outdoor spaces, which given that this is summer right now and we have been surviving this pandemic where inside spaces are less safe to be with other people because of the pandemic than outdoor spaces. But I'm curious, are there in your neighborhood, can you think of indoor spaces that I guess, well, indoor and outdoor spaces that just feel like places that people can hang out safely on purpose, that's not just the corridors and the streets and the sidewalks?
This Nicole said gardening makes her feel safe because she's like outside like meeting her neighbors, and I really loved that, because today I was at the community crops garden stealing tomatoes. I think it's still a free garden, the one on the corner of was it B or whatever. It was last year, so I don't know if that's still true, but I was stealing tomatoes, and there was this woman walking by. She's like, "Oh, are you picking berries?" And I was like, "No, I'm picking tomatoes." And she's like, "Oh, can I have one?" And so I gave her one, and then a few moments later, she came walking by again, and I was like, "Hey, I found like another variety of tomato. Do you want one?" And it was just like this very small, super precious moment. And then she asked me, she's like, "Where's the nearest place I can get grated cheese?" So it's just this super small interaction where she was getting to know business infrastructure in the neighborhood. She was getting to know about a free community garden. So it was just a really precious moment. And I find so I think community gardens, I think I've met a lot of people at my community crops plot. And I think like interacting with the built environment has a certain way of like, you own this space, and then the person that sees you gardening or picking up litter or painting a mural or whatever, they see you taking ownership of that space. So it identifies you as like a neighbor, right? And I think that invites, that placemaking invites relationship building, which kind of results in like safety. So that's just something I think about from my perspective, and just from that stealing tomatoes, so.
That's a great segue, Vic and Kat. So what are some of the places where people feel safe? I mean, it can be like a structural building, maybe like a community center, or just some of those more open, hopefully free gardens where you're able to take tomatoes. But what are some other spaces where people feel like in their neighborhoods is just kind of a safe place to congregate and maybe meet new folks, or, you know, some existing people in the neighborhood?
So I can't remember who said this, but to follow up on something someone said, I've recently, since the pandemic, decided to take up, I'll call it jogging, not running. It's like pudgy girl jogging. And so I've been jogging through my neighborhood more, and then going to the trail along 27th. And so I've found the trail to be a place that I find really safe. And it was weird because I had never thought of it. I never considered it unsafe. And then my mom was like, "Do you feel safe?" I mean, I don't usually go after dark, but I'll go at dusk. And I was like, "Oh, actually, I consciously do feel safe in this space," because it's the kind of place where it seems like people are going to, you know, be not social necessarily, but you're passing a lot of people, you're passing other people with dogs and stuff. And it's pretty well lit, which is also key.
We just have a lot of community organizations in Clinton. So Salvation Army, there's always something going on at the Shield. We have the Bay, which go get a drink over at the Bay when they're open, and there's just a great atmosphere in the sound of children and skateboards, and yeah, I like all of that. We also have the huge school property that, you know, I've always felt good. I'm about a block away of sending the kids that direction towards the school playground when it was allowed. And then parks during the day. At night, sometimes I don't feel as safe, but during the day, there's always a pickup basketball game somewhere. If you have a ball, there is a game to be played.
Yeah, I was thinking in terms of Belmont neighborhood, like the Belmont Community Center was always a place that a lot of students felt safe, families really enjoyed. Isley Library was always very welcoming, and a place that anybody and everybody could come to for whatever they need. I'm thinking of Belmont Rec Center, the schools, but I think the common theme as I'm thinking about this, Vic, you mentioned like a place where anybody can go and just kind of hang out when they want. And I feel like, you know, for the Belmont Community Center, it wasn't necessarily open to the community. It might have changed now, but when I was working in the neighborhood, it was really for the people who kind of pay to go to the before and after school programs or are a part of some of the rec leagues, or same with the Belmont Rec Center. It was supposed to be open to the public, but it was mostly for students in the before and after school program, and then open just, you know, a little bit of extra time for folks who wanted to come work out or use the limited computers that they had available. And so I think that while those spaces exist, and same with the schools, I've always felt very comfortable in the schools, but not everybody feels comfortable going to the schools. And, you know, it's kind of hard to get into them even pre-pandemic, you know, with security and things. So I think that was actually something we were kind of missing, was an indoor space where anybody can come and just hang out, do their thing, you know, whether they were connected to the community already or not. So
That's a really good point.
Oh, I'm sorry, Isabel. You go. I want you to go.
Yeah, thank you. I am thinking about like where I feel safe, and I'm thinking about like when I used to live on 9th and G, and I would walk home from like a night out or something, and I would always stick to the places that had lighting. But then when I got to kind of like the 11th and G business district, I felt safe because I knew that there were folks who I had connected with who lived across from the businesses or lived nearby. Whenever I walk by a house where I know someone, that made me feel safe. And then I've also made the walk. I'm on 7th and Sumner now. I've made the walk from downtown to 7th and Sumner. And like I stuck to 11th Street because we got the lighting improved there. But then I also know that like sometimes Pepe's at his shop late, and I feel really safe walking in front of there. Or we know the custodians at Everett Elementary that work overnight and take smoke breaks across the street at our space. And so like I know that they're gonna be there. And so just like knowing those people who you make connections with is really key to like making me feel safe personally.
I want to piggyback off what Lindsay said in the opposite direction. And so the F Street Community Center is some place where it feels really safe inside and not safe outside all the time, just kind of depending. And so I've noticed I have to sometimes make a conscious effort to not cross the street. And I started thinking about, well, why is that? Why is it that I have this? And I think part of it is because of like some catcalling that I've received that makes me want to like steer across the street. And it's normally like a particular type. I feel like there's a type of person that does that to me. But then I realized, well, that's a stereotype I'm making about who's catcalling. And so I'm avoiding people at this location that fit what I think a type is, whatever that might mean. And so I made a conscious effort to go right in front of the F Street Community Center, even though it sometimes makes me uncomfortable. And sometimes I see things I really, really don't want to see. And I started feeling safer there because of that conscious effort. And I started trying to say hi every single time I passed anyone that was in front of it, whether I thought they looked sketchy or not. I just always said hi. And so now I know some of the guys that always hang out in front of the F Street Center on those benches. And like that's helped me feel more safe. But I do think, I think part of the reason why I feel less safe in that space is because it's not monitored by the infrastructure inside the building. It's sort of like a free-for-all, even though there's like it's kind of weird. It's like a weirdly complicated space because right next to the benches is a police station. So you'd think you would feel super safe, but there's no one really there ever. And like one time something happened and I knocked and like no one answered. So it's like all kinds of, this is a lot right there. And I'm sure people in the neighborhood know what I mean.
That's a great, oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think some people have similar feelings about the library, like Bennett Martin in particular, but just knowing how under-resourced the libraries are, I feel like, I still feel like libraries are such a great place of where I feel safety, and that I'm not always sure what my visceral like assessment of safety is, but I guess I just want to mention it's a lot to ask of a small staff to be resourced in such a way where librarians are also needing to be trained in handling mental health crisis and all of these other potential things that can happen. This is just kind of in comment to that monitoring sort of thing. So my question is who are we placing that responsibility on, and are we giving them the tools and resources that they need to be able to do it effectively and in a way that's done with integrity and care?
I wanted to build off of what Kat was saying. I really like that strategy you mentioned of just always saying hi. I felt similarly about the F Street Community Center, and even inside, I realized that I feel safe there physically, but also really nervous when I'm there because I don't know what to do, or if it is a space that I'm allowed to be as an adult who's not part of the after school programs. And that makes me think that part of how I understand safety is having a clear idea of what the boundaries are in the space. So what can I do here? What is against the rules? And who would I talk to about if I had a question of what the rules are in this space or someone breaking them?
Cassie, I think that boundaries piece, was what I was really drawn to by what you and Victoria were noting about, outdoor spaces, but that way that you put that in regard to knowing your role in a space, what's allowed, what's encouraged, what are you there for? That, I know that's something for me, puts me at ease. When I go volunteer, doing something, if I don't have a task, if I don't know what food I'm putting where, I'm nervous. And that's in a pretty structured framework. And so even more so when, and Lindsay pointed at this too, where are the spaces that don't have kind of a paywall and don't have also an identity wall, because that's its own thing, whether they're talking pretty clear cut of being a kid in after school or an adult, but then there's so many other identity components about, are you welcome here? And do the powers that be intend you to be here? That's a really important thing for laying that groundwork of those free spaces. And I don't know, just all of this seems to be tying together too with what Ella was asking about with libraries are fantastic because there's so much and it is free. That's part of what makes it a library, but yet there's so much more being demanded of staffers outside of those roles and boundaries that we kind of understand librarians and staffers to do. Yeah, I appreciate y'all are so smart, man.
I want to make a connection between so what Kat said, what Ella said, and what Cassie said of so we're taking our boundaries and we're letting people know about them. And I'm thinking of Kat's example of saying hi to people when she's walking by them. So then all of a sudden you're not just some rando passing by who's going to make an assumption about you. If someone says hi to you, you feel acknowledged. So I think that catcalling is in some ways a reaction to feeling unacknowledged or feeling kind of forgotten or even by the person feeling like you're an approachable person and worthy of saying hi to. And then when you're doing that, then you're kind of building this network of collective community care and mutual acknowledgement of one another and mutual acknowledgement of our dignity and like our personhood. And I think that those are, I'm really happy that we're having this conversation because I think it just kind of put words to the things that I've been feeling sometimes when I say hi to someone versus when I don't say hi to someone. Or when someone asks me like, where are you going? And I'm like, oh, to my house, like, ha ha ha. Or even just when I just say hi to people and people are like, I'm really, or like when I say hi, like, how are you? And they're like, wow, I'm really good. Thank you for asking. Like all of a sudden you're creating your boundaries of I am a human and you're a human too. Let's treat each other like we're coexisting in the same community.
I think linking to that, Isabel, someone had mentioned, I think Nicole had mentioned being out on the trails and saying hi to people or waving or acknowledging. And sometimes you don't get an acknowledgement back. And that doesn't bother me because that's one of those where I'm like, you know what? I felt good to smile at that person. And maybe next time they'll be encouraged to smile at someone too. And I try to think of it as like the ripple effect that, well, I don't care. I felt good. And maybe it made you feel acknowledged as well. And maybe you'll pass that on to later.
It's also, I think, interesting because it's really contextual. Like if I want to say hi to people, most of the time I do. But a few weeks ago I was on a walk and I did get catcalled. And that happens to me kind of rarely, so it kind of shook me up. And then later on my walk, people were like smiling at me and I was like ready to fight them. I was like, what, are you trying to catcall me too? Is that what's gonna happen? And like, no, actually they were just being nice. And when I wasn't like primed that people were like out to harm me, I would have been really appreciative of that. But like how you're feeling about how the world sees you can really affect like how much you want to say hi back.
I think that is really powerful. Like positive assumptions about your neighbors. Like our neighborhood is one that gets stereotyped pretty negatively, and a lot of like the crime activity is happening like pretty close to my house, and I feel safe most of the time. Like I really do feel safe most of the time. And I think it's like kind of what I was saying about passing F Street and just saying hi and realizing like that positive assumption is so powerful, because if you're passing like a homeless person that doesn't like receive gaze or acknowledgement of their human existence, or somebody that's kind of maybe just doesn't receive that like integrity or dignity, to do that is really powerful. And I actually think and for people that actually need resources, it can be an opportunity for them if you want to be that person. But of course you don't have to, you can just say hi. So I can't remember where I was going with that, but yeah, assuming positive intent of people before they like, if they don't prove that they're untrustworthy, just assume you can trust them, which is a risk, but it also is a risk that I think makes communities safer in the long term.
This is such a great conversation. So I don't want to stop talking about all of these wonderful things. It's 7:06 and we had sort of slated the final 30 minutes of the workshop to maybe split up into a couple of breakout rooms and talk about specific safety topics that you might be interested in. Isabel's kind of been taking some notes, and so we can do that. Or if we want to stick to this larger group and just kind of keep this conversation going, I just want to make sure everyone who wants to say something has the space to do so. I know sometimes that's more difficult when we have this many people in one large room. So what would everyone prefer? Do you want to break up into 2 or 3 different breakout rooms and talk about a topic that specifically brought you here? Or do you want to stay in this larger room and just kind of keep throwing some different ideas and thoughts out there?
And specific topics can be brought up here too, in the larger room.
Absolutely. Yes, we can shift conversations however you want to do that.
If you're scared of being an outlier, just DM Nancy.
All right, let's just stay in this larger room. If you have anything you want to share with me, any like specific comments that maybe you don't want to share with the larger group, feel free to private message me, and I'm happy to take those notes down. Ultimately, what we want to be able to take away from this conversation again is what the additional safety workshops will discuss moving forward. So who are some of the experts we can bring in to talk about these conversations at a little bit of a larger scale. So sorry I interrupted all of that, and let's bring it back to a place where y'all want to keep going.
I have a specific question or thing, I guess. So what brought me to this is since the pandemic, particularly on the block that I live on between 16th and 17th and D, there's been a lot of crime this summer that is, and I've lived here, I've lived within the same 2-block radius for 10 years. And there just seems to be a lot more this summer, like violent crime happening. And we had a drive-by shooting across the street earlier this summer. And so I've been really thinking, like, I feel really close with the people on my side of the street. But I don't have there's 2 large apartment buildings that are across the street from me that have a lot of turnover, and they're pretty low rent. And like, even I had a police officer come to my door the other night. They were looking for a runaway who apparently randomly gave them my address. And she kind of laughed and was like, yeah, the sketchy stuff usually happens across the street, right? And I really feel that divide, and I'm trying to find ways that I can sort of build community and intercede in some positive way, but also ways that I can do that without, becoming a community organizer per se. Like doable ways to connect and make things better.
That's a great, that issue of kind of the divide even within a microcosm of a neighborhood. I have felt that numerous times while living in Lincoln. And what you're pointing to also about a large apartment building, feeling kind of like it's hard to know how to like penetrate in with a personality and like engage folks, especially depending on the setup, because as we've talked about, like physical actual setups impacting how much time people spend outside and like how those opportunities for approaching. I'm wondering if because I also recognize, Nicole, like not trying to take on an entire project, because you are also, we're all neighbors, like we're people, and even though like Isabel and Kat and Kieran and I get to do this like it's part of our job, but that's not your full-time job, and so respecting that capacity. I'm wondering if I have some ideas of how to kind of start that, but I'm wondering if this is something that resonates with other people, and if other people have, I don't know, similar ways that, or if they've approached a similar challenge before.
I just kind of want to chime in. Oops, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say I wanted to chime in on like the language aspect. I had a few years where I was like definitely doing activist work, but with people be like, Kathy, you're an activist. I'd be like, oh, no, I mean, I'm not a real activist. And I think community organizing is the same way. Like community organizing at its core means trying to get your community to look more like the way you would like it to look and working with others to do that. And that doesn't have to be your job title, and you don't have to do it 40 hours a week, but you can still do it, and it matters, like whatever level of effort you can put into that.
So years ago, is Grant still on? Yeah. NeighborWorks did a lot in our neighborhood up to the 2010 census maybe, did a lot of work on just little block parties and just inviting the people on your block to a barbecue in your backyard. And it really pulled people out of their houses, and we got to know a lot of the neighbors that we would never, like, I mean, we know our direct neighbors, but we don't know a lot, like 4 houses down. I probably don't know them, even though if they were stuck in a snowdrift, I would help push them out, or I would send somebody to help push them out. I wouldn't do it myself. But with that, now, 4th of July, we have a huge party. So that requires me to go to all my neighbors to block off the street. And so I have to knock on the door, and I'm going to get them to say yes if I invite them. So that just creates those type of opportunities. And with a huge apartment complex, maybe you can't invite I don't know how many people, 100 people to dinner or barbecue or something, but if you invited 5 apartments that, hey, we're just having a block party, we might get loud, come on over. My kids now do that. If they're having a loud party, they live to the north of me. They now invite the neighbors so that the neighbors don't call them in for a noise complaint because they feel part of it. They've been invited. So it kind of forces them to knock on the door and say, hey, we're having a party, you're welcome to come, you know, that sort of thing, and it avoids that. So, you know, a little piece at a time. I don't want to invite 200 people to my backyard, but if I can invite 3 or 4 families, maybe that's within my realm of doing.
I think that's exactly what one of my thoughts was. And Cassie, you described it more eloquently, that like, yeah, the kind of micro organizing I think is in some ways more important. I don't want to be super hierarchical, but like when you're faced with kind of this really monolithic looking sort of thing and you don't know how to starting with those 2 people, and both simultaneously respecting your own capacity as a human, and also being able to describe yourself as like, yeah, I am organizing this. I am organizing my community and I'm building my community. And it's just, we're starting, you know, whatever, it's not small, large, it's just you're starting and it's a community, so.
I guess part of my question along with that was thinking about how, because like that was kind of the idea that I started with originally. And one, there's the challenge of it being a pandemic. So I'm not sure how much, you know, like I've seen like in the years past, like the Near South Neighborhood Association will do block parties and stuff like that. But I want to find ways to connect with the people that are, you know, here that I think don't go to those kinds of things, but also find ways to do that. And I'm not a typically like nervous or scared person in the sense of, I don't know, I'm super trusting normally, like to a fault. Don't tell anyone, but my back door is always unlocked because I lock myself out a lot. But I also don't want to put myself at like at stupid risk. And so I worry about, you know, because a neighbor who lived next door to me was nice to one of the people who lived in this building across the street, and he is mentally ill and is aware that he's mentally ill and sort of became fixated on her and started stalking her, and she had to move. And so I'm wondering if people have experience with that sort of, like, how do you find a way to do it and, you know, be genuine and things like that, but also not unintentionally set yourself up for some sort of risk, or is there just always risk involved?
I think there is risk involved. I really appreciate Kat's mention of like lead with trust. And then there's this book that I really love, and it talks about how trust is so foundational to building community, but also trust has very sharp edges. So you have to be able to be checking in with yourself constantly and recognizing your own boundaries and being able to basically practice and how to exert them. And so I guess not to put like all of the onus on you for that, but it is one way to kind of like that you can have some control in mitigating some of it. Like I even practice like things that responses that I have to cat calls or things like that.
I feel like that's a really interesting and complex situation, because like you don't want to mislead anyone, and it feels you feel kind of guilty about it, but like also someone's stepping over your boundaries. And I know this on like a different level, like a very scaled down instance of this, but like my neighbor really likes to talk. And if I engage him in a conversation, he'll be here for like 20 minutes just going off. And so when I'm in the mood, I'll pretty much open myself to conversation and say, hey, Mark, like, how's it going? And then I'll ask him a question after the initial wave. But I've kind of figured out that if I'm not in the mood, or if I'm busy doing something else, I'll just wave at him and then like turn away, or wave at him and then go back to what I was doing in my yard. And so like those, like, I think that nonverbal language is super key or even just saying like, hey, I'm like super busy, I gotta go. Maybe I need to get better at using my verbal language, but definitely using my body language and saying like, hey, like, you're still cool, we're cool, right? But also like, I don't have time for an hour-long conversation.
I have a thought. I'm holding up, also, I just want you guys to know this was my saved object. It's a twirlion. I don't think I'm saying that right, and I went to art school, but this blends graphite together, and it's just soft and weird, but that's my object I found. But I have a question sort of for the group as a whole. I think thinking about my community in Everett and Near South, I think it would be useful to have like a safety session on sort of like mental health and how do you like calculate that risk? How do you decide, is this somebody that I should like, hey, how you doing? Or if I should maybe kind of wait it out, then say, hey, do you need something? Like, you know, how do I approach this person? Or should I approach this person is sometimes a question too, and we have to be like realistic about that. And so I think sometimes it is hard to know, and I don't know if you guys have similar situations in your communities where it's sometimes like you don't know the risk. So is that something y'all are interested in? We have the survey. Nancy already did the survey, but yeah, that's something I think about. Is like there's a certain point at which I just don't know, and like that's the point at which I would really like to call like the People's City Mission or like Center Point or some sort of service that provides mental health. But then it's like sometimes it's a closed door and you don't know who to call to like get that person the help they need. So like that's where I kind of find it challenging.
I have a lot of that here. We have the soup kitchens 2 blocks away, so we have a lot of homeless traffic that takes the neighborhood instead of 27th Street. And 99% of the time, hi, how you doing? You know, that type of thing. If a lot of scrappers will go through the trash for metal, so if I know there's metal here or there, I'll help them find the metal. But you're the fine line, because a lot of them do have mental health issues, and it's that fine line of, am I home by myself, a lady using a wheelchair, where do we, you know, so it's kind of one of those, the big dogs in the yard, I think I'm good. But it's a fine line of how close do you become to the person, and that they know I'm going to give them the metal that I have.
Yeah, I really wish that there were a community response and community care specifically around specifically sensitive to issues around mental health, because on principle would have a very difficult time contacting like police, because I think first of all, behavior is so easily criminalized and then perpetuates like the conditions that person is living in, or worse, people with mental health problems or dealing with mental health issues. I think like I heard nearly 60% of the people who experience violence by police or something like that. And so I just I'm trying to figure out what the community response is. And I know, for example, like Matt Talbot, some representatives from there have mentioned that if you reach out to them, that they will do what they can to bring people in through Matt Talbot. But I still think it's lacking. I think we really need like a much wider care response.
I also would add that like someone being outside while mentally ill is not like necessarily a safety risk. It's like if you're talking to someone and it becomes clear that they're seeing reality a little different than you, maybe because of mental illness, that's not inherently a problem or a sign that they need to like get off the streets. And that's been hard even for me, like knowing that intellectually to realize, because it seems like, well, you should be able to do something to help. Personally, I feel really comfortable intervening in like crises of like depression and suicidality because I volunteered with the crisis hotline for a few years. But crises that are more like maybe an autistic meltdown or someone who is schizophrenic or manic, those feel like I don't know what to do as much. And I don't know what strategies I should use or like how to assess risk in those situations. That's definitely something I would like to learn more about.
I agree completely, Cassie. I think like I think we aren't mental health specialists, but I feel like all of us and probably all the police officers in Lincoln, the police department, could really benefit from like training to help identify maybe certain different types of common mental health issues and like some good tactics for responding to them. Because the difference between someone having like a manic episode or an autistic incident, or just like each situation, there's certain things that are probably good for all of them, but just having there's some awesome specific differences between those different types of issues. So I'd really like to see ways in which like a crash course or like 101 on some mental health training could be brought throughout the community.
And not to add to like the different things that we don't know how to deal with, but I'm really bad at recognizing when someone is abusing drugs or is going through or is currently on drugs. And so I think that that's another thing where I don't want to continue to perpetuate like the criminalization of like why they are on drugs in the first place, or why they're using or struggling to maintain sobriety and stuff. But I'm just like really bad at picking that up. And I think that that's something that I personally hear about a lot in our neighborhood, especially because we have Center Point in the neighborhood where people are seeking help, but then they're also going, finding it hard to live and exist. And so I think that that's another thing that we could add on to that is, what do we do in a, like if people are being unsafe while they're using, or how can we provide a safe space for folks? I remember one time there was a guy like walking down the middle of Goodhue, like not on the grass, but like on the street. And I was walking with my girlfriend and she was like, oh my gosh, he's like having a really tough time. And I was like, I didn't even notice. I thought he was just like sleepy or something. But like, what do I do? Because like he's walking through the middle of the street. I don't even know. But I didn't feel comfortable approaching him and leading him towards the sidewalk, So I think that that's something that we could definitely benefit from, especially because of like the criminalization of a lot of different things that feed into that.
Yeah, and having a better knowledge of what the resources are, who we can reach, and having some sort of, I guess I feel completely unknowledgeable. Do we have resources that are not just calling the cops to be able to help people in need like that?
No.
No. I really want all of you to come back to our next workshop so we can like dive deeper into this. And I just want to say, this whole conversation gives me a lot of hope. And because I really think it starts with us, because, I think about as a black woman, I think about a particular case where like a 13-year-old boy who had like a BB gun was like shot in a park by a police officer who thought it was like a grown man with a gun. And that police call, right? Someone called the cops on this like 12-year-old boy, right? And like that person could be any of us, right? So how do we prevent that whole situation from even taking place? How do we find the right person to contact, right? Or how do we get to know our neighbors so that we know like that's not a like 25-year-old man with a gun, like that's my 12-year-old neighbor playing with a BB gun that he probably shouldn't have. Like how do we create communities that are safe to sort of prevent some of this stuff from happening in the first place? That's maybe more me speaking as me there, but I really hope that we can see you guys in the future at more of these conversations, and that you bring your neighbors with you so that we can kind of broaden this dialogue. And it's powerful too that these are so many cities, there's so many little neighborhoods in our city represented here today. Like, that's really powerful. So thank you for coming.
Yes, I just want to echo everything that Kat just said. This has been, I mean, all of our community builder workshops are very, oh, there they go. All of our community builder workshops are really amazing. And I love that we just have this space together to be able to connect, to ask these questions. And again, we're not the experts on this. We're going to try to work together and bring in the right folks who can address some of these things. Oh my gosh. And if it doesn't exist, we're going to work on making sure that it does become a reality. So a couple of things, you know, we have a couple of minutes left, and I just want to share with everyone. You can join the Collective Impact Lincoln Facebook page. If someone is quicker than I am, they can drop that into the chat. And then I will send a follow-up email to everyone who joined us today on the call with the survey that I also put in the chat, and I think I fixed it so you can choose multiple things if you want to discuss them at upcoming workshops. And I'll also send out the slides that we shared today with some of those guiding questions in case you want to have some of those conversations in your own circles or at different groups that you're a part of. So we will follow up as a team. We're going to kind of digest all of this information, and hopefully we will have at least 2 to 3 more workshops around some of these safety issues that have come up today. And I just want to thank you all so much for sharing everything that you shared today and for being an active participant in this conversation, because this is how we get things done, and this is how we make real change happen in our communities. So thank you everyone so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And if you have any other questions, you all should have my email address. You can reach out to me, and I'm happy to work with you on anything going forward.
Can I say one thing, Nancy? I also would love for, you know, join the Facebook group, do the survey. Also, I would love for people to think about who are, I know there's a lot going on tonight, who are the other people that you want to see in this space, in these conversations, whether it's this space or in these conversations going forward, that you can invite in. That could be anyone, but just, yeah, thinking about that too.
Absolutely. We want to be able to be as inclusive as possible in these conversations. So feel free to invite anyone that you think would benefit from this, or that maybe could lead some of these conversations, because that's the other part. You know, we know that we don't have all of the answers, and we want to make sure that we have the experts kind of sharing those perspectives and resources out. And we're happy to guide those conversations and facilitate. So. All right, everyone. Thank you again so much for joining. Have a great rest of your night.